Hey everybody, I'm Steve Garvin, the Abundant Story Architect, and we are here for another episode of the Stories of Gold. I am so delighted and excited to have on the show with us today, Heather Vickery, who is a good friend who we met, gosh, a couple of years, might have been a couple of
years ago, I think. Yeah.
And we've just kind of been hanging out in each other's orbit a little bit. And I love what Heather is doing. I love who she is and the whole conversation that she is creating around being brave and, not worrying about putting on this fake face.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. That's a nice thing for you to say. I love what you're doing too. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Thank you. So tell me, Heather, how did this book begin that you have now published? And tell us a little bit about what the book is and why you wrote it.
Yeah, folks, if I don't know you already, and I probably don't, I wrote a book and Steve said, let's talk about your book, which is really great. So I appreciate the opportunity. The book, and I know I challenge Steve with my language skills.
The book actually, Heather has wonderful language skills. She's just a little bit more liberated with her language than I am.
A little liberated. That's a great way to describe it. I love that. So I'm a success and leadership coach, as you know, Steve, and I'm a speaker, an author. I'm a lesbian. I'm a mom of 4. I'm an avid reader. I'm a social justice warrior, but I also have lived through finding myself in a shrunken life, living a fear-based life that I didn't belong in. And essentially, to make a very long story short, I burned everything to the ground except for my kids, because that would be terrible, and rebuilt it all. And as the years went on, I realized that I had done that in a very systematic way. And I finally put it together to create what I call the Brave Method, which is a method for creatively and strategically problem solving, planning, designing, and building a life that you love and a business to go with it. But it's the life that we're focusing on, right? So our parents and our grandparents and society, everybody, their job was their job, and they built everything around their job, especially if they were an entrepreneur. And I love being an entrepreneur. I have literally been an entrepreneur almost my entire adult life. I learned very quickly out of college that while I work well with people, I do not work well for them. So I love being an entrepreneur, but it can't be every aspect of our life. Can't run the show. We have to run the show and make this a part of it, hopefully a successful, thriving, happy part of it, but we want you to be joy-filled. So the book, after years and years, is me breaking down the Brave Method in what I think is a really fun and really approachable way. I do lots of short memoir stories, and then I feature what I call Brave Spotlights. So case studies of either past podcast guests of mine. I host the Brave Files podcast, which is got 189 episodes out this week, which is really exciting. Or clients that I've worked with, right? So we call them Brave Spotlights. There's a little sample of what one of those looked like. I had so much fun laying the inside of this book out with my layout designer. And then we also have Brave Action sections, which are sections where you as the reader can go and do these things right now to sort of lean into this, your own element of Brave. So Brave is an acronym. Brave is my whole business. Brave on Purpose Collective, which Steve is a member of. I invite everyone to come and hang out with us. The Brave Files podcast, the Intentionally Brave Entrepreneurs, right? So Brave is totally my business. And it made sense if I was going to name a method that I would use Brave. And Brave stands for boundaries, reassessment, reframing, resilience. I call those the 3 R's. And I kind of think they're really the meat of it. BRA, action and accountability, vulnerability, and expand and empower. And the first floor can happen in any order that you want. But the 5th one, that's a result. By setting boundaries, right? By communicating clearly and thoughtfully and intentionally. by reassessing and reframing and getting up and doing it again and being resilient, by getting into action, by having accountability, by delegating, by being vulnerable and bringing your true self out, knowing that the world wants you to play big. We do those things, we show up for ourselves, we end up expanding and empowering ourselves. And those are things that only we can do. That's inside work. No one can do that for you. So that's the book.
Mm.
F Fearless, Making the Brave Leap.
In looking at the Amazon promo introduction to the book, one of the things that really struck me, and just the whole idea of the title, that, you know, in our society, we tend to hear a lot about, you know, feel like fear and do it anyway. And, you know, and
I love that. I'm a big fan. I mean, feel the fear. That's the whole point, is we feel fear. Fear is a thing that exists, and pretending that it doesn't. That's why it's called F Fearless. Like, I don't want anyone to, where fearlessness is not the goal, right? That means it's for sociopaths and 3-year-olds. That means we're not being thoughtful, not being intentional. We're running headfirst into things without, is this what I want? Is this direction I want to go? Right? Fear, on the other hand, is informative.
Mm.
It tells us about ourselves. And the coolest thing about fear is it is what enables bravery. We cannot experience bravery without fear first.
Mm. One of the ways that I heard this, I kind of, not the same topic, but a similar idea described was, you know, you have a coin, and on one side of the coin, you have fear. On the other side of the coin, you have brave or bravery, that they coexist together, right?
Always.
That they're not independent. We don't become brave by, you know, finally, you know, never feeling fear.
Absolutely not.
It's honestly a little bit like the conversation I had earlier today about depression, that when things really began to turn around for me with regards to depression, wasn't when I stopped feeling depressed, is when I finally, and this is after decades of dealing with depression, finally just accepted it. It's like, and didn't hold a bunch of crap, you know, a lot of baggage around the fact that I was depressed, and just accepted it and said, that's interesting.
Well, right. That's that space of surrender and self-compassion, both of which I do talk about in the book, because it's I love that you said that's a really important part of moving through the brave method, is this surrender of some of these things are just facts, and we don't need to judge them. They exist. And now what? And now that you have this knowledge, now what? What do you want to do about it? Maybe nothing, who knows? But I find for most people, and certainly for me, almost all of my clients, awareness without anything else will create change.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right. So if you acknowledge, just as a fact, I'm depressed. I've been depressed for a really long time. It sucks and it feels bad. Just giving yourself that space to exist is a little bit like releasing a pressure valve.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It was amazing to me how powerful that was. And similarly, you know, when we allow ourselves to feel fear, and really, and I mean that literally, and I think you do too, that, you know, you allow yourself to feel fear, that you don't try to shove it into a closet. You don't try to, you know, cover it up with a blanket. You don't try to, you know, cover your eyes and your ears and, you know, whatever else. It's allowing yourself to feel fear and to be okay with it.
Absolutely. I mean, something that I believe is really important, and again, I talk about it in the book, is I believe in the importance of feeling all of our feelings fully, without judgment, without shame. This book is not about just be positive at all accounts. Like, I'm certified in positive psychology. I believe in positive psychology. I've written 2 books on gratitude. Gratitude will change your freaking life. But that doesn't mean that everything's good all the time. It doesn't mean you're happy all the time. It doesn't mean that you're not angry or sad or mad or upset or hurt or lonely. We really deserve to feel our way through all of our feelings. Again, to be informed by them, not to judge them or be shamed by them, but just to acknowledge they're okay. And now what do I want to do with this information?
Yes. Yeah, I'm totally with you with regards to allowing ourselves to feel all the fear, feel all the feelings.
All
That,
the feelings.
we're human beings and have been evolving for, millennia. There's a reason we have these emotions, and trying to suppress them, trying to, push them down, trying to pretend that they're not there is actually not only counterproductive, but also can be really dangerous.
Very. It's really unhealthy and unsafe. Yeah. The funny thing about fear is physiologically, neurologically, it's the same as excitement.
Mm.
And it's our brains that attach something to it, right? I mean, it's why some people are thrill seekers. You go, oh, I'm going to get on that giant roller coaster, and that's exciting. And some people go, hell no, I'm not getting on that roller coaster, because they're afraid, right? But our bodies are reacting the same way. What does your mind tell you? And if you've experienced it, and that's really a lot of what this is, like, what can we learn from it and try it anyway? Or how can we try it in a small way? I love small intentional baby steps to just get a taste. Is this going to be okay? Is it going to get me a result that I want? Because once we've done something, it becomes easier to do. Now, we never, as we said earlier, we never like climb the summit and put our flag in, and now we're never afraid again. Like, that's not a thing that's going to happen. You're going to get new fears, and they're going to probably be bigger. But that's usually a really good sign. And I'm in that space, even personally right now. I really do try to practice what I preach. I have been rearranging the back end of my business. I'm restructuring my signature program with the Intentionally Brave Entrepreneurs, with where I am in the world and who I want to be in the world and how I can best serve people. And that's a scary thing, right? When you've been doing something that's going well, to think about, we're not drastically changing it, but changing it and shifting it in a way that feels more aligned for me. What if they don't like it? What if people don't want to stay? Well, then maybe that's not where they should be right now. And that surrender of, but then you had to let go of the financial concerns, but the right people, the people who don't fit will move on joyfully, and we love them. And then the people who do fit now will move in, as long as the marketing works. Right? As long as they know it's there and they feel aligned with it. But you've got to trust that process.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that fear and other emotions teach us is that when things don't work out at first, that one, that's normal, and two, that there is a way to get past that.
Absolutely.
What can I learn from this disappointment? What can I learn from whether that disappointment is on the target market side or on the entrepreneur side? That when we listen to those emotions, and validate and be curious about those emotions, then we can more easily, more gracefully navigate to the place we want to be, right?
Absolutely. That's the 3 R's. That's exactly what it is don't hide from what's been happening. Dig into it, right? Reassess it and get on. I mean, this happens, and I talk about it in the book for sure. We do this with money, right? Especially as entrepreneurs, where we don't want to do our finances because we're afraid, like, what if we're not making enough money? What's it going to say? And more often than not, if you're actually showing up and doing the work, you may find that you've hit those target goals. You didn't even know it because you were afraid to look. Or in one case that I talk about in the book, one of my clients was so afraid to do it. And then she did it, and she was $500 away from the goal she'd set for that month. She's like, $500, I can sell something for worth $500. Like I'll just make these 3 phone calls and I can, she's a bit of a multi-passionate entrepreneur. She's got a lot of different skills. She's like, I could make $500. Right. And so if we can see where we are on our own trajectory, we can push ourselves in a really healthy way to achieve the goals that we've decided we want to achieve.
Absolutely. One of my practices is to either at the end of the day or the end of the week, look and see what my delights and disappointments are. Right. And, a lot of times when I've gotten to the end of the day and I'm feeling kind of, worn out, I've, put my all into what I'm doing and I'm feeling honestly a little bit low energetically. And then I'll do those delights and disappointments. And it's like, wow, I accomplished that. Like this morning, I looked at what I accomplished yesterday and it was like, and I was afraid that I hadn't accomplished hardly anything. And I looked at it, and it was just like, oh my gosh, I got a lot done yesterday. Absolutely. And I was really intentional about it, but we oftentimes don't stop to pay attention to where we are on the journey. We let the immediate emotion kind of cloud everything and not take stock as to where we actually are.
Yeah, if we let everything else guide the journey except for us, then we find out, or we miss the opportunity to find out if we still want to be on the ride. Is this still taking me where I want to go? Or are these still my goals and aspirations? Is this my vision? Does this feel aligned? It's letting everybody else drive the bus, but you should drive your own bus. And I love that. I love the idea of the delights and disappointments. I have this fun story. And in fact, I do, as you know, I do a weekly live show every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Central in the Brave on Purpose Collective. And I'm doing this. We're going to talk about this tomorrow. So you're getting a little sneak peek of it. But week before last, now the days are all mushing together, I was at the She Podcast conference in Arizona. I was a speaker and it was a really great event. And I was hanging out with my core group of podcast buddies and we were having a great time. And we do in my family, we do favorite part of the day and what you're grateful for every night at dinner. But I'd never before been in a situation with all adults when one adult says to the rest of the crowd, hey, let's do a gratitude practice, like around the table. And they called it the peach and the pit, which I loved. Right away, I loved it. I thought that was cute. And we did it, right? You get it. The peach is the juicy part of your day and the pit is the icky part of your day. But it sat on my heart literally for 24 hours until we were back together for dinner the next day. And I said, I want to tell you why I loved that so much and why I'm going to now take it and use it in my work. Because we can't have a peach without the pit. It's literally the seed.
Absolutely.
Right. And so I love delights and disappointments, but disappointments feels bad. It feels like you did something wrong or you got let down. But if we can reframe it and think, what is this a seed for? And I heard you say that, like, what did I learn from this? What do I want to do differently? Like, what is this a seed for? What am I planting with this? It feels so much better, doesn't it?
Yes. And actually, that's exactly the way that I use it. So at the end of the week, I do my delights and disappointments for the whole week. And then on Monday, I take those delights and disappointments and I say, okay, what are my intentions for this week? And the majority of the time, what my intentions are is to take the seeds from the delights and disappointments. And the disappointments are actually the ones that are actually most energizing for me, because it's like, well, if I can knock this out, if I can resolve this, that is going to be a freaking amazing delight. That's not just going to be like, okay, I did it. It's going to be like, it went from like total suck to total awesome, because I was willing to face it, willing to face those dragons.
I love that. I really do. I love that so much.
And so and I've definitely wrestled with the language myself. Do I really want to be talking about disappointments? But one of the things that it's kind of like, the whole idea of fear, and that fear is not a comfortable word and not a comfortable emotion that we want to deal with.
Yeah.
But if we can have compassion for ourselves in dealing with those disappointments or those fears, if we can allow ourselves to be in those dark places, then we can navigate more clearly to a brighter place, right?
Absolutely. There's an entire section of the book called Be Radical. So as you're doing these things, as you're moving through the Brave method, it's radical self-care, radical self-trust, radical self-compassion, right? And I love that idea of fully embracing that in all the ways. And we can't do this growth work without those things, without the radicals.
Absolutely. You know, and when you were talking about the work that you've done around gratitude, and that's actually part of my practice too, is that every morning I write down at least 3 things that I'm grateful for. One of the things in my life that I am most grateful for is also the darkest time in my life.
Absolutely.
You know, the hell that I went through with depression and nearly losing my life was a terrible time for me to go through, but it was also the opening and the pit of the peach that allowed me to grow the life that I do love, you know, such that I wake up, you know, Monday mornings thrilled to get back to work.
I love that for you. But I know that intimately. I mean, the things that I went through were really, really hard. They were hard, difficult years. I feel very lucky. I don't use the word blessed very often. I'm not a religious person, but that would be that right concept. I've never been clinically depressed. Now, it doesn't mean I didn't feel depressed when shit was really depressing, because I did, but it still was really dark. And I sort of just felt like I was, you know, drudging through mud all the time. But I would not have this business. I would not be doing the things I'm doing. I wouldn't have written this book. I wouldn't have a podcast. I wouldn't do any of these things if I hadn't gone through what I had gone through. And there's something very freeing in thanking your challenges and, for lack of a better word, even your traumas. And I say that gently. If someone caused trauma to you, I'm not necessarily speaking to that, but the things that we do to ourselves or that we experience, and finding the gifts in them. And I would venture to say, so I have a lot of people, we do gratitude all the time with my clients. And when things are good and they're feeling great, like the gratitude just flies out. They're like, "Oh, I'm grateful for this and this and this." And when they're having a bad day, they're like, I don't think I'm grateful for anything. Then, you know, they'll come up with some, you know, whatever they can come up with. And I remember once, for me, the best thing I could come up with, like, it had just been such a shitty day. The best thing I could come up with was, I'm grateful I have legs that work. And then I went, wait a minute. I am really grateful that I have legs that work. Like, really grateful. I know lots of people who don't.
Yeah.
And we don't stop to think about that. So I venture to say it's when we are in difficult spaces that gratitude is the most impactful and helpful. And don't give in.
Yeah.
Find something basic. And then I have to laugh. I think you've heard the story before, but I love to tell this story. I was doing gratitude. Words matter, friends. And the way you frame your words matter. They land, they feel differently. They change the way you show up in the world. And I was doing gratitude with a client once. This was a couple of years ago. And she said, well, I'm grateful that the plane I was on last night didn't crash. And I'm grateful that my plants, when I got home, my plants weren't dead. And she went on like that. And I'm like, hold on a minute. Like, what stopped you from saying, I'm grateful my flight was safe and my plants were still alive? Like, why? And she's like, oh, I didn't even realize that. I'm like, that is a lot. That's a big, heavy negative blanket. Like, we don't have to do that to ourselves.
Yes. Yeah. The language that we use is so powerful. That was another key element of my recovery was learning to be really conscious of the language that I used.
Yeah.
And part of that came from realizing that I was so unconscious of the language that I was using, that I was literally in a very dangerous, depressed state. And I didn't even know it until I realized the language that I was using was mean, it was pretty clear what my intent was. And, but I had to stop and listen to it. And as I healed, to stop and notice, when I was using language, talking about the plane that didn't crash or the plants that didn't die, and to reframe that and see, was there a more positive way that I can express that? Is there another angle that I can take in order to see that from a more helpful, empowering place?
Love that. Yeah. I love that for you. And I love that for all of us. And I love how transparent you are about the entire process, because folks need to hear that. We need to know, whatever it is that you're experiencing or feeling, folks, you're probably not the only person that's ever felt that or experienced it, and you're not alone. And it's, if you want it to be okay, it eventually can be.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when I was going through the crap that I was going through, I held on to hope as literally as a mantra. It was not something I felt. It was not something I even believed that. I didn't believe that I would ever reach a point when I would get to the other side of that. But I held on to the possibility that it could be. And by continuing to live into that, it became not only a possibility, but became a reality.
Yeah, that's really magical. Like you don't, I do a lot of visualization work, and it feels very aligned with what you're saying, which is we don't necessarily have to know how or why. We just have to know there's a possibility. And that is part of the definition of resiliency. Have you read Angela Duckworth's book, Grit?
Yes, I have.
Steve, I was like, you're an avid reader. You got to read Grit. Angela talks about that. Like the key, like the thing between people who are resilient and people who aren't is the belief that things are not permanent, that this can change.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, whether we're dealing with depression or, the biggest fear of our lives, or, publishing a book, which I've been on my own book writing journey for the last couple of years, and can be so frustrating for me because I'm not further along than I would like to be right now. That if we just keep going, if we just keep facing the dragons, the difficulties, and believe that, we can tame those dragons, that everything will work out. And it's awesome to see this book coming out in just a couple of days. Yes. And it's been just so good to have this conversation with you. I always enjoy our interactions.
Me too. I'm looking forward to your summit coming up in a couple of weeks
now. Yeah.
The time flies, doesn't it?
It does so fast.
I appreciate the support and the camaraderie around it. And I can't wait to read your book when it comes out. It's a little bit of a labor of love, to say the least. But
to say the least, yes.
To say the least. But if you've got a book and you get it out, there's no reason not to. I'll ask you the same thing that I would ask a client or myself, Steve, is what's the worst thing that could happen?
Yeah. Well, and exactly. I believe in this. It's just a matter of, I don't know, I guess there's a lot of refinement that I'm having to do right now in order to get to find my path to get to where I want to go.
Maybe we should talk about this separately.
Maybe.
I'm hearing some self-sabotage there. The thing about writing is just write and then change it later.
Yeah, well, what I'm finding with the writing process is that I can crank out words incredibly easily. Yesterday I wrote 2,700 words. And that's honestly not even, I have for months written 4,000 words a day.
Wow. So you've got the content.
Cranking out content is not difficult for me.
Okay.
That's been a big part of my healing journey, a big part of, it's every day I write, but it's figuring out there's another element that I'm trying to figure out how to navigate, and I'm getting closer to figuring out how to do that. And I don't know what the answer is, but
Well,
I
let me know if I can help. If you want to talk through it sometime, we can
Thank
talk
you.
through it together. Sure.
Yeah. I think I'm getting much closer to it. And I hope, fingers crossed, that, that it will come out, that this however long labor will produce something that I'm really happy about. And for that matter, I can look at the small wins that I'm having. I've been
Absolutely
dreaming of writing poetry for years, and now it's a daily practice of mine to spend at least 15 minutes working on some poetry, and instead of just looking from the sidelines at people who are writing poetry, seeing and sharing what I'm writing with other people. So I mean, it is happening. And I love the fact that, a poem, at least the poems that I write, it's 100 words or less generally.
Yeah.
I can crank it out, even if it's a total beast to figure out how I'm going to do it. It still comes out, and I can have these successes on a weekly or
wonderful
bi-weekly
wins. They're wonderful. Put out a book of poetry.
Yeah, definitely. That will come forth. Anyway, so a couple of questions that I like to ask all my guests. What in your mind makes for a rich story?
A rich story. That's a good question, Steve. As a reader, a rich story transports me into the space of the writer, where I can, and I'm a visualizer. I am learning not all people are visualizers. I have 2 daughters who literally don't see the movie in their head when they read. And so I can only speak for visualizers, but it puts me, I can feel the way that they were feeling. I can see the thing. I laugh out loud, or I feel verklempt or whatever. Right. So it transports me from where I am into where they are.
Yes. Beautiful. So my next question is, how are you enriching your story?
You ask really easy questions, Steve. Really easy. Really easy questions. I believe that I am enriching my story by continuing to journey through it, by being honest about the growth and the change, by acknowledging the moments that I feel fearful and what I think that means and what is possible if I do practice what I preach, and that I share it as part of, for me, it's part of that process is sharing it, maybe publicly, but if not, with my accountability partners or with my partner, or, whomever. I talk in the book, I talk about my personal board of directors, those folks. Right. And I did it yesterday. I had a tough day yesterday. Like I said, there's a lot of growth and change happening in my company and in my program, and it's scary. And all of the imposter syndrome ghouls were like, yesterday. My own coach was like, "Oh, Heather didn't show up to today's meeting. Crazy Heather showed up to today's meeting." Like, okay, so you're fine. And so I had to really process all of that. But I went to my peeps and I said, it was a big group text, like, I'm feeling all of these things today. And then they ask good questions. And then I get to say, oh, here's what I think that actually is. Right. So.
Awesome. So last question. How do people get a hold of your book?
So you can find my book on Amazon or Bookshop. If you want an easier way to do it, if you go to vickeryandco.com/ffearlessbook, it'll take you to all the different order options, but you can find it anywhere. You can type in my name. You can type in FCK because it doesn't have an asterisk, Fearless, or Making the Brave Leap. You'll find it. It's pre-order right now, but the book officially comes out on Thursday, October 28th. There's a Kindle version. There's a hardback. Paperback is coming in December. Yeah. And come hang out with us at Brave on Purpose, right, Steve? We have fun over there.
Yes, it's a great time.
Thank you.
Love what you're doing. Love you, Heather. You were so awesome. Just really
Thanks,
grateful
Steve.
for spending this time together with you today.
I appreciate it.
And to our audience, until our stories meet again, be the bright light in someone's dark night.